truth of Albert Einstein's definition of insanity. And I quote, "Insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over and expecting different results. We need to do something different."
We absolutely do. Thank you so much for that, Zain. And this is powerful. Africa called, and the world has come. His Excellency, you called, and Africa is setting an agenda. And I want us to give the leadership, the people, all the different organizations in this room a round of applause for coming together to do this. This is a moment. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, yesterday some powerful themes came through. Two quotes in particular from the young delegates stayed with me. They said, "Our countries will be burning and drowning, and you will not be there to save us." You know, it occurred to me that countries are drowning and burning today. So if we don't do something now, what will our children and generations to come experience? The other thing they said was, we have to trust you, and you must trust us. And I thought such wisdom, grace, hope, and responsibility captured in one simple statement. And so, ladies and gentlemen, we must call to the world from Nairobi today and make it clear that it is past time to address the tough issues. It is past time to hold the difficult but much needed conversations on Africa, risk, perception, reality, resources, policies, regulations, systems. And it's past time for these conversations to be guided by equity. That is what we need.
And Africa has the resources and assets, including mineral and energy resources, agricultural capacity, and natural capital to promote the global decarbonization agenda. But to realize this potential, the world needs to do its own part in helping steer Africa on the pathway to an inclusive, sustainable, and progressive.
Africa's GDP must therefore be revalued based on its carbon sequestration and biodiversity, which provide global public goods. If this is done, the debt to adjusted GDP ratio of several African countries will be much lower, and they will have greater headroom to borrow more financing to support their development, including investing in the greening of their economies. We must, Your Excellencies, therefore, turn Africa's economies green, not because others ask us to do so, but because it is in our interest to do so. Africa must develop its own carbon markets, properly price its carbon, and turn its vast carbon sinks into new sources of enormous wealth. Africa cannot be nature-rich and cash-poor. As we look towards COP28, Africa needs must be front and center, powered by the leadership of our heads of state and government, our youth and the private sector, and the voices of our communities. We must be the vuvuzelas of climate financing for Africa. Together with partners from around the world, let's make it happen for Africa. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. Gracias. Shukran. Asante sana.
Excellencies, our next speaker is His Excellency Musa Faki Mahamat, the chairperson of the African Union Commission. Welcome, Your Excellency. A formidable global reputation of peacekeeping. We know you have.
Excellency Dr. William Ruto, President of the Republic of Kenya, Excellency Azalia Soumani, President of the Union of the Comoros and current Chairman of the African Union, Excellencies, Head of State, Government and Delegation, Excellency Antonio Guterres, United Nations Secretary General, Excellency Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Union Commission, representatives of international organizations, financial institutions, civil society, youth, women, honorable ministers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. First and foremost, I would like to thank President William Ruto, the government and the people of Kenya for the exceptional hospitality accorded to us since our arrival in this hospitable and green capital, Nairobi. The beautiful and natural environment in this country augurs well for the great success of our climate summit. The organization of this climate summit in such friendly conditions in just 6 months, thanks to the decision of the African Union Summit last February, is striking proof of the excellence of your leadership, dear friend William. I sincerely congratulate you. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, le récent rapport du groupe international d'experts sur le changement climatique, GIEC, confirme nos craintes. L'Afrique se réchauffe plus rapidement que le reste du monde. Si le phénomène n'est pas stoppé, le changement climatique continuera à avoir un impact gravement toxique sur la croissance des économies africaines. La productivité agricole a été réduite de 34% entre 1961, depuis 1961 en raison des changements climatiques, plus que dans toute autre région, d'où une pression insoutenable sur les systèmes alimentaires africains. Les pays africains sont ainsi confrontés à des charges et à des risques disproportionnés découlant des phénomènes météorologiques imprévisibles, notamment des sécheresses prolongées et des inondations dévastatrices à tous les niveaux. Des crises humanitaires massives provoquent des effets néfastes sur l'économie, la santé, l'éducation, la paix et la sécurité, ainsi que d'autres risques connexes. À titre d'exemple, la saison 2022-2023, environ 18 millions de personnes ont été affectées par la sécheresse dans la seule corne de l'Afrique. Récemment, le cyclone tropical Fred a touché plus de 1,2 million de personnes et provoqué la mort de plus de 700. On estime également qu'entre 2019 et 2023, les pertes économiques dues aux catastrophes en Afrique se situent entre 20 et 35,5 milliards de dollars américains. Cette liste lugubre est sans fin. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, le changement climatique n'a épargné aucun secteur. Si l'on se rappelle que l'Afrique compte environ 400 millions de personnes qui n'ont pas accès à l'eau potable et environ 700 millions qui n'ont pas accès à un bon système d'assainissement et que les évaluations d'experts indiquent un déficit d'investissement entre 11 et 20 milliards de dollars par an jusqu'en 2023, on se rend alors compte que le continent est au bord d'un vrai drame consécutif aux dégradations de ses conditions climatiques. Évidemment, ce n'est pas le seul facteur et l'on a tort de ne pas intégrer ces données dans l'analyse globale des facteurs négatifs dont la gouvernance est au centre. Je ne voudrais pas céder au pessimisme et j'essaie qu'au tableau général, nous avons bien heureusement quelques lumières et de nombreux indicateurs favorables. Je ne peux cependant pas ne pas rappeler qu'environ 600 millions d'Africains sont privés d'électricité, tandis que 800 millions parmi eux n'ont pas accès à une cuisine propre et sont donc exposés à des infections respiratoires potentielles dues à la fumée. Les infrastructures sont également mises à mal par les changements climatiques. Et comme vous le savez tous, répondre aux besoins de l'Afrique en matière d'infrastructures et développer des services d'infrastructures rentables nécessite des financements considérables, estimés à environ 170 milliards de dollars par an. Il est en ce sens encourageant de constater que les gouvernements africains ont consacré environ 3,% de leur PIB au développement des infrastructures au cours des 20 dernières années. C'est trop peu par rapport à certains pays émergents. La Chine et l'Inde, par exemple, consacrent respectivement 7,7 et 5,2% de leur PIB aux infrastructures. L'on perçoit ainsi dans quelle direction orienter l'effort. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, ce sommet nous offre une excellente occasion de traduire les ambitions climatiques de l'Afrique en opportunités d'action pratique et de consolidation de nos voix sur les questions brûlantes du changement climatique. En perspective du sommet des Nations Unies sur le climat et à la COP28 aux Émirats arabes unis. À ces rencontres d'importance mondiale, l'Afrique doit, entre autres défis, mettre en relief la situation préoccupante et parfois dramatique au Sahel, dans la Corne de l'Afrique où sécheresse et inondations alternent, au bassin du fleuve Congo, à la déforestation dangereuse et aux conséquences désastreuses des cyclones en Afrique australe et dans les États insulaires. Il est urgent que l'Afrique se présente à toutes ces rencontres avec des propositions concrètes à exécution sans report. Je réitère avec force mon appel de venir à ces deux prochaines rencontres avec des propositions précises, sans les noyer dans la littérature et la litanie habituelle, sur l'impératif d'une justice collective à l'Afrique, dont la responsabilité est bien limitée dans la pollution de la planète, avec une part inversement proportionnelle du volume d'investissement global dans l'environnement. Cet appel pour un rétablissement de la justice à l'égard de l'Afrique gagnerait à se faire accompagner d'une vraie réforme de l'architecture financière mondiale à laquelle est consacré à juste titre un panel de haut niveau lors de ces sommets. À l'évidence, cette réforme doit résolument porter sur les organes et institutions financières qui structurent cet univers au fonctionnement fort éloigné de l'Afrique. Dans cette réforme souhaitée, une question vient à l'esprit: le poids de la dette et le déficit de financement des ODD. À elle seule, l'Afrique représentait avant le Covid un besoin de 1 300 milliards de dollars par an pour satisfaire ses besoins en développement durable à l'horizon 2030. Alors que les besoins globaux de financement des ODD dans la même période à 2 500 milliards de dollars pour le financement des pays en développement. Comme tout le monde le sait, le stock de la dette publique de l'Afrique subsaharienne en fin 2022 était estimé à 1 140 milliards de dollars. Des 650 milliards de DTS mobilisés, l'Afrique n'a reçu que 33 milliards, soit 4,5%. Au regard de ces chiffres ahurissants et bien d'autres, il apparaît clairement qu'il n'y a pas d'intervention mondiale pertinente en faveur de l'Afrique, sans une solution crédible du défi paralysant, celui de la dette. Pour porter ce combat qui inclut le financement de l'adaptation, 100 milliards de dollars par an, l'Afrique a rassemblé ses volontés dans sa position commune à travers un momentum unifiant les voies africaines, notamment en matière de changement climatique. Ce sera à l'évidence le point central de notre agenda au sein du G20 dès que nous y accédons. Il reste cependant entendu que dans ce grand et vaste combat, l'Afrique ne devrait se suffire des incantations. Comme pour son indépendance et sa libération, elle est plus que jamais interpellée. À compter d'abord et avant tout sur ses propres efforts, sur son génie propre, sur les qualités et vertus d'un leadership audacieux, imaginatif, uni et solidaire. Plein succès à nos travaux. Je vous remercie. Asante sana.
Excellencies, we are overwhelmed by the support that we have received for the summit, and we want to listen to each and every one of us. So
Smart 24, driving business.
My name is Msingu Jotham. I work as General Manager, Kayonza Growers Tea Factory. This is a smallholder tea factory presently owned by 8,000 smallholder outgrower farmers. We thank government of Uganda through UDC. They have supported Kayonza Growers Tea Factory with a tea processing line. Before government support, we are getting challenges with processing green leaf because farmers would produce more than the factory would handle. I'm glad to mention that today we are able to handle all the raw materials that come from farmers, because at first we had the 2 lines that would only be able to process 80,000 kilograms of green leaf per day. But presently, we are able to process 150 kilograms of green leaf per day. And this is because government of Uganda supported us with modern machinery. Before government intervention in our business, we are getting challenges of processing raw material. Farmers would produce more green leaf volumes than the capacity then. We are now able to handle all the green leaf volumes received from our smallholder farmers very effectively.
My name is Twinomusha Johnson. I am a tea farmer of Kayonza Growers Tea Factory. Formerly, it was run by UTGC, Uganda Tea Growers Corporation, and in 1995 it was privatized and sold to the farmers or shareholders of Kayonza Growers Tea Factory. And since then, we have been getting income from the factory through selling of our tea, and the income I get, I use it at the household level. And I also get school fees from the income from the tea, and part of the money is also used for investment, expanding the tea gardens. I have 23 acres currently, and I get between 400 kilograms to 600, and tea is not constant because we have got a dry spell and rainy seasons, so the production varies. In the rainy season we get a high production, and during the dry spell we get a low production. And the company has also benefited the community or the people of Kanungu district or Kigezi at large, because it employs people in the various sections: production department, extension department, engineering department, and administration. The car factory also works with various people. We have got stakeholders, partners. We have got people who supply items to the factory. They also get income. We have got green leaf transporters, people who go to the field to collect tea from farmers. They also get income. We have got people who supply machinery to the company. They also get income, and very many others.
We thank the government of Uganda, we thank UDC for that support. And Kayonza has been able actually to produce the best tea in the country because of that. Allow me also to wish all Ugandans a happy Independence Day celebration as we clock 60 years.
Say goodbye to paperwork and travel costs. Now every MTN customer can register to invest in securities anytime and anywhere with Zabu in a few simple steps. Step 1. Dial *292 hash. Step 2. Select option 1. Register with Zabu. Step 3. Enter your full names. Step 4. Enter your national identification number. Step 5. Enter your national identification card number. In 24 hours, you will receive an SMS confirming your registration. Congratulations, you are now ready to invest.
Smart 24 Driving Business.
أولاً ضرورة إعادة النظر في أدوات التمويل المتاحة حالياً والتحول إلى التمويل الميسر والمنح لتسريع وتيرة التحول المطلوب. ثانياً أهمية مراجعة معايير تدفق الاستثمارات لضمان حصول القارة الأفريقية على نصيبها العادل من التمويل. ثالثاً التأكيد على أن تمويل المناخ وهو تمويل جديد وإضافي وليس سحبا من مخصصات الدعم التنموي. رابعا ضرورة العمل على تفعيل آلية واحدة وفعالة ومناسبة لإعادة استخدام الديون الحالية من خلال آلية فعالة لتحويل الديون إلى تمويل المناخ. وفي هذا السياق نتطلع لأن يمثل مؤتمر دبي المقبل اختراقا في تنفيذ تعهد الدول المتقدمة بتوفير 100 مليار دولار سنويا لتمويل المناخ الذي لم يتم إدراكه رغم كونه ليس أكثر من التزام رمزي بالمسؤولية التاريخية المشتركة ومتباينة الأعباء. ختاما فإنني أود إعادة التأكيد على أن طبيعة قضية تغير المناخ والتعامل معها لا يكون إلا من خلال منظور تعاوني قائم على تعزيز النظام متعدد الأطراف يؤسس على الإنصاف والعدالة ومراعاة الظروف الوطنية للدول. وأنتهز هذه الفرصة للثناء على ما طرحته جمهورية كينيا الشقيقة من عناصر ورؤية لصياغة نقاشاتنا في الأيام القادمة، ولأجدد التأكيد على دعم جمهورية مصر العربية الكامل بصفتها الوطنية وكرئيس للدورة الحالية لمؤتمر الأمم المتحدة للمناخ للنسخة المقبلة بدبي تحت رئاستها الإماراتية التي نثق تماما في قدرتها والتزامها بالبناء على نتائج شرم الشيخ وإدراك المزيد من النتائج الإيجابية. وشكرا لحضراتكم.
Your Excellency, Excellencies, Africa is Europe's closest neighbor and our sister continent. Our geopolitics therefore concern each other. Europe and Africa have close economic, cultural, and geographical ties. To speak for the European Commission, I would now take this opportunity to invite Her Excellency Ursula von der Leyen, the European Union President. Welcome, Your Excellency.
Thank you very much, dear President Ruto, for hosting this Africa Climate Summit. And thank you very much for your leadership on climate action ever since you took office. I very much welcome Kenya's Climate Change Act 2023 that was launched during this summit and that puts strong emphasis on carbon markets. We fully support you on this important topic. Presidents, prime ministers, fellow leaders, excellencies, I want to greet my colleague Moussa Faki, Chairman of the African Union. I want to greet the President Assoumani from the Comoros. I want to greet Secretary General Antonio Guterres, Dr. Sultan Al Jaber, President of the COP28, my fellow leaders, ladies and gentlemen. I am deeply honored to participate in this discussion. This summit is a crucial step to prepare the upcoming COP28 meeting and to make sure that Africa's voice resonates around the world and that Africa's priorities as a continent that is most affected by climate change are duly taken on board. Today, I'm here not only to listen to you, but also to bring Europe's offer to be your ally at COP28 and to work together on all issues on the agenda. Because however different our two continents may look, we share the same interests when it comes to climate action. We hear you, President Ruto, and dear friends, when you say that Africa's first priority is to grow your economy, yes, and lift as many people as possible out of poverty. Yes, you're so right. Climate action is part of the solution. You are part of the solution. With your huge potential for renewable energy and clean hydrogen, your critical raw materials, your incredible nature and biodiversity, and your young workforce. You can help clean up global energy systems and supply chains while creating good jobs here and economic opportunities yet that your people demand, rightly so. This is a win-win partnership which benefits Africa and the world. For instance, the benefits of expanding Africa's clean energy sector would be massive. By speeding up the transition to solar and wind power, energy sector jobs in Africa could double in a few years. And Africa could produce enough clean energy not only to power up your continent, but also to export abroad. Climate action can be one of the main drivers of Africa's growth. But for this, Africa needs massive investment. And Europe wants to be your partner, in closing this investment gap. First of all, we fully support the need for multilateral development bank reform. It is time to move from words to action, absolutely. Secondly, investment has to come. And this is why 150 billion euro in our investment plan are designated for Africa. We call it Global Gateway. They are aimed at the African continent. Global Gateway supports investments ranging from hydropower plants in the DRC, Burundi, Rwanda, and Tanzania, to the 1 billion euro initiative on climate adaptation and resilience in Africa, which we announced at COP27. And Global Gateway is unique in the global investment landscape. We're not only interested in extracting resources, we want to partner with you to create local value chains, to create good jobs here in Africa, We want to share European technology with you. We want to invest in skills for local workers. This is crucial for the young people. Because the stronger you are as suppliers, the more Europe will diversify supply chains towards Africa, and the more we both will de-risk our economies. It's a clear win-win. Namibia, for instance, is now building a new hydrogen industry, as well as rare materials value chains in partnership with Europe. And later this morning, President Ruto and I will conclude a new hydrogen partnership between Kenya and the European Union, with the objective to further develop the green hydrogen economy, and with the full support of Team Europe. This is good news for Africa and for Europe alike. So we should work very closely as partner. Yet, public money from major economies, however crucial, is not enough. And this is why we need to bring the conversation on climate financing to the global stage at COP28. Let me briefly share 3 specific points that will be discussed here in Nairobi to pave the way towards COP28. First, on attracting private investment to Africa. Second, on carbon pricing and carbon credits. And third, on setting global targets for the energy transition. On the first point, the green transition will require an unprecedented scale of private investment. Public finance will not suffice. This is true for Europe, but it is also true for emerging market and developing economies. Private capital will need to be mobilized at scale. And here, green bonds are widely recognized as providing part of the solution. This is why we just put forward a new proposal to attract private investment. It's called Global Green Bonds Initiative. We know that emerging economies can face hurdles to access capital markets, but we can change that together. Europe has the biggest and most advanced green bond market in the world, so we are ready to share our expertise with your teams on how to develop your own green bond markets, and at the same time, we will push on the investor side. Together with the European Investment Bank and our member states, we are allocating 1 billion euros to de-risk private investments in emerging markets. This could help to attract up to 20 billion euros in sustainable investment. So, let's work together on that to build and grow Africa's green bond markets, and let us bring together this crucial point to COP28. There's another solution that would unlock huge resources for climate action in Africa, and that is carbon pricing and true carbon credits. And this is my second point. I believe, as you do, President Ruto, that setting a price on carbon emissions is one of the most efficient and one of the most effective tools in our hands, because it fosters innovation by the private sector, that's crucial, because it makes heavy polluters pay a fair price, that is necessary, and because it creates revenues that can support the clean transition in developing countries. That's what we need. And this includes also to include the carbon sinks that have been mentioned, and you are rich in carbon sinks here, and to reward this contribution. We have to get there. We will discuss this in more detail in the next session, so let us work together to bring a proposal for global carbon pricing and true carbon credits at COP28. And finally, on global energy goals, if we are to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees, we have to speed up the global energy transition. That means if we want to match our goals, We need to triple renewable energy capacity, and we need to double energy efficiency by 2030. This sounds bold, but it is doable. If we step up global investment in renewables, this would make clean energy more affordable for all countries, including here in Africa. And this is why COP28 President Dr. Sultan Al-Jaber and I champion an initiative for global targets for the energy transition to be achieved collectively. Because only what gets measured gets done. So, the global goals will provide a benchmark to track the progress and to attract even more private investment. So, I look forward to working with you on this and much, much more. I hope that Africa and Europe will join forces to reach a global agreement at COP28. Ladies and gentlemen, these three proposals may look bold, they may look impossible to achieve. But in the beautiful words of Nelson Mandela, who said, "It always seems impossible until it's done." We have a huge responsibility to fight climate change for the good of our children, for the good of our grandchildren. And I wrote down these beautiful words of the African youth yesterday. Our countries are burning and drowning. As you're not here to save us, we have to trust you now. So, my friends, let's reward the trust of these young people and show responsibility. Let's join forces for COP28. Many thanks. I feel so honored for being invited. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Excellencies, the Nairobi African Leaders Declaration on Climate Change and Call to Action, which we hope that we will get from you, Excellencies, tomorrow, will take a tour of the United Nations Secretary General Summit, then eventually to the UAE for COP28. What better way to start preparing the way for the declaration than by having the COP28 President-designate, Dr. Sultan Al-Jaber, the COP28 President-designate, to address this summit. Dr. Al-Jaber is the Minister of Industry and Advanced Technology of the United Arab Emirates. Welcome, Your Excellency.
Your Excellency, President Ruto, Secretary General Guterres, Your Excellencies, Heads of States, Your Excellencies, Heads of Governments, Your Excellencies, distinguished ministers, honored guests, colleagues, and dear friends. It is indeed my pleasure to be back here in Nairobi and to have the opportunity to share with you my thoughts at this inaugural Africa Climate Summit, where Africa is evidently championing a new vision for climate action. We're gathering here in Nairobi just 3 days before the UNFCCC releases the findings of the first global stocktake. And let's just face it, we already know that the world is way off track, and we know what this report will actually say and what it will conclude. The world is losing the race to secure the goals of the Paris Agreement. And the world is struggling to keep 1.5 within reach. Collectively, we must admit that we are not delivering the results we need in the time we need them. We must also accept that business as usual is simply not working, and that business as usual will not allow for a paradigm shift. We need a smart, pragmatic disruption. We need an integrated approach that delivers transformational progress. And we need a plan that leaves no one behind. That is why I have been and I continue on calling on all parties to unite around a plan of action that is fully inclusive, a plan of action that fast-tracks a just, responsible, orderly, and well-managed energy transition, a plan that will focus on people, lives, and livelihoods, and a plan that will finally fix climate finance. Ladies and gentlemen, Africa contributes just 3% of global emissions. Yet, we all know that it suffers some of the worst consequences. Droughts, floods, and failed harvests have exposed 1/5 of Africa's people to hunger, tripled the number of people displaced in the last 3 years, and is dragging down Africa's GDP growth by at least 5% every year. But there is also another narrative that unfortunately is overlooked and in a big way undermined and underestimated, and that needs to get out there. And that is Africa is also a beacon of hope, filled with potential and a global example of what pro-climate and nature-positive development should and must look like. Ethiopia's Green Legacy Initiative is enhancing food security and stimulating green jobs across the Horn of Africa. The countries of the Congo Basin are protecting vital rainforests and helping preserve the world's natural carbon sinks. Kenya is closing on its goal of 100% clean energy by 2030. And the number of sub-Saharan countries in Africa with significant installed solar power has grown 6 times in the last 5 years. This great continent is rich in the resources that can help not just Africa, but the entire world transition to a zero carbon and high growth future. That said, we first need to deal with some realities, and we must accept to come to terms with these facts. Almost half of Africa's population still have no access to electricity. Almost 1 billion people lack clean cooking fuels, and this energy gap will only increase as Africa's population grows. These basic energy needs must be met, and meeting them with low-carbon, nature-positive solutions will meet Africa's development and climate goals at the same time. And the key to making this happen is, of course, finance, and finance, and finance. This finance must be made available. This must be made accessible. And this finance must be made affordable. According to the African Development Bank, $250 billion annually is required to meet Africa's climate finance needs. Africa only receives 12% of that amount, and less than 2% of that is going to adaptation. We can all agree that this is neither just or equitable. We must agree that it is a big missed opportunity. The World Bank estimates that every dollar spent on climate adaptation brings an average of $4 in benefits. It simply makes sense for Africa to get a fairer share of global climate finance. That is why I am calling on donor countries to close out the $100 billion pledge they made over a decade ago and to replenish the Green Climate Fund. I will continue to press on these issues. I am also calling on donors to double adaptation finance by 2025 and for all parties to transform the global goal on adaptation from theory and text into real action and tangible results. We also need early pledges for the Loss and Damage Fund to help vulnerable countries recover from severe climate impacts that they already are exploring and experiencing. What was promised in Sharm el-Sheikh must be delivered in Dubai. We can no longer accept pledges and announcements without clear roadmaps of implementation. In parallel, we must upgrade our financial architecture. We need a complete upgrade. In fact, we need a surgical intervention of the global financial architecture that was built for a completely different era. IFIs and MDBs must step up, and they must up their game. They need to raise concessional capital and lower debt burdens. They need to attract and leverage private capital at a multiple. And the multilateral, public, and private sectors need to mesh together and work as true partners to accelerate the delivery of practical solutions and real impactful projects on the ground. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the United Arab Emirates has applied this model of genuine partnership to invest in clean energy projects in 70 countries around the world. We have always chosen to meet global challenges by building bridges and working with like-minded partners on solutions in the pursuit of progress and sustainable development. That is why I am pleased to answer the call made by African leaders to seize the opportunity of green growth. And today, it is my true honor to announce a new initiative between the United Arab Emirates and Africa that aims to unlock Africa's capacity for sustainable prosperity. Your Excellencies, the Abu Dhabi Fund for Development, Etihad Credit Insurance, Masdar, the Abu Dhabi Future Energy Company, and EMEA Power will join with Africa 50 as a strategic partner under the guidance of the UAE and African leadership to develop 15 gigawatt of clean power by 2030. Working together, we will deploy, and by working together, we will deploy $4.5 billion that will catalyze at least an additional $12.5 billion from multilateral public and private sources. It is our ambition that this will launch a new transformative partnership to jumpstart a pipeline of bankable clean energy projects in this very important continent. This initiative will target countries with clear transition plans, robust regulatory frameworks, and a real commitment to putting the necessary grid infrastructure in place. It will clearly demonstrate the commercial case for clean energy investments across this very important continent. This initiative is designed to work with Africa and for Africa. It will act as a scalable model that can and should be replicated. And it will support COP28's global goal of tripling renewable energy by 2030. And here, let me take the opportunity to thank His Excellency, the President of Kenya, and his government, and the African Union Commission and the EU Presidency for championing this goal alongside COP28. It's through their leadership that they are choosing a path that makes economic and climate sense at the same time. And let me extend an open invitation to all Africa's leaders to join us at COP28 to help mark a new, ambitious era for Africa's sustainable growth. Ladies and gentlemen, as COP28 approaches, I am determined that it is a turning point that delivers for everyone, everywhere. We don't want to leave anyone behind. Climate change is a global fight, and it demands a global solution. If Africa loses, we all lose. And if Africa succeeds, we all succeed. Progress for one is progress for all. Let's unite, act, and deliver to turn the rhetoric into real results. Let's turn pledges into tangible projects on the ground. And let's launch a new and optimistic future that puts the world on a climate-positive pathway and offers an opportunity for all to prosper. I thank you all, and I look forward to receiving you at COP28. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. Excellencies, the Nairobi Declaration, like I indicated, will find itself to the UN General Assembly, and we are happy to have with us the UN Secretary General, His Excellency Antonio Guterres, who is both a politician and a diplomat who will guide the discussions and midwife the contents of our declaration to find itself into UN resolutions. Welcome, Your Excellency.
Your Excellency, dear President William Ruto, thank you very much for your initiative, your enthusiasm, and your leadership that brought us together. Asante Sana. Excellencies, friends, an injustice burns at the heart of the climate crisis, and its flame is scorching hopes and possibilities here in Africa. This continent accounts for less than 4% of global emissions, yet it suffers some of the worst effects of rising global temperatures. Extreme heat, ferocious floods, and tens of thousands dead from devastating droughts. The blow inflicted on development is all around, with growing hunger and displacement, shattered infrastructure, systems stretched to the limit, all aggravated by climate chaos not of your making. It is still possible to avoid the worst effects of climate change, but only with a quantum leap in climate action. The people of Africa and people everywhere need action to respond to deadly climate extremes. First, we need far greater climate ambition, with countries hitting fast forward and massively accelerating action to limit temperature rises and impacts. And the largest emitters must lead the charge, in line with my Climate Solidarity Pact and acceleration agenda. And here, from a low-emitting continent, Africa, I make a very strong appeal to the large emitters, to the G20 countries responsible for 80% of the emissions that will be meeting this week in Delhi. Assume your responsibilities. Developed countries must commit to reaching net zero emissions as close as possible to 2040, and large emerging economies as close as possible to 2050, with support from developed countries to do so. And it's time to break our addiction to fossil fuels and invest in a just and equitable transition. We need to see credible plans to exit coal by 2030 for OECD countries and by 2040 for the rest of the world. And we need ambitious renewable energy goals in line with 1.5-degree limit. And we must bring affordable electricity to everyone on Earth, and particularly in Africa, while simultaneously reaching net zero electricity by 2035 in developed countries and 2040 elsewhere. Second, reaching these targets requires climate justice. Developed countries must present a clear and credible roadmap to double adaptation finance by 2025 as a first step towards devoting at least half of all climate finance to adaptation. And they must also keep their promise to provide $100 billion a year to developing countries for climate support and fully replenish the Green Climate Fund. And all countries must also operationalize the Loss and Damage Fund proposed at COP28 this year. Every person on Earth must be covered by an early warning system by 2027 by implementing the action plan we launched last year. And 6 out of every 10 Africans currently lack access to these systems. The early warning for all Africa action plan launched yesterday under the leadership of the African Union will be critical to addressing this need. And more broadly, we need a course correction in the global financial system so that it supports accelerated climate action in the context of sustainable development. And we can't achieve one without the other. And this means an international financial system that is able to provide an effective debt relief mechanism that supports payment suspensions, longer lending terms, lower rates. And it means recapitalizing and changing the business model of multilateral development banks so they can massively leverage private finance at affordable rates to help developing countries build truly sustainable economies. The global financial system must be reformed to be an ally of developing countries as they turbocharge the just and equitable green transition that leaves no one behind. Which brings me to my third point, making Africa a world leader in renewable energy and green growth. This continent is rich in renewable energy potential. Africa is home to 30% of the mineral reserves that are critical to renewable and low-carbon technologies like solar power, electric vehicles, and battery storage. Of course, we must not repeat the mistakes of the past. To truly benefit all Africans, the production and trade of these critical minerals must be sustainable, transparent, and just across every link of the supply chain, with maximum added value produced within African countries. African leadership is also helping to generate innovative green economies anchored in renewable power. From the Greater Horn of Africa, where over 85% of electricity generation comes from renewables, including massive hydropower projects in Ethiopia, Kenya, and Sudan, to wind and solar projects in Egypt, Algeria, Tunisia, and Morocco, to Mozambique, which gets nearly 100% of its energy from green and sustainable sources, to the increased installation of large-scale solar projects, including in South Sudan. At the same time, Africa is home to 60% of the world's best solar resources, but only 2% of global investments in renewable energy over the last 2 decades. Now is the time to bring together African countries with developed countries, financial institutions, and technological companies to create a true African renewable energy alliance. With adequate access to financial resources at reasonable cost and technological support, renewables could dramatically boost economies, grow new industries, create jobs, and drive development, including by reaching the over 600 million Africans living without access to power. Renewable energy could be the African miracle, but we must make it happen. We must all work together for Africa to become a renewable energy superpower. Excellencies, friends, just as the injustice of climate change burns fiercely here in Africa, so do the opportunities. I'm convinced that Africa can be at the heart of a renewable future. The summit and the solutions being discussed here represent a big step forward, but our countries must not be alone in this journey. At the end of this month, I will hold, on the way to COP28, a Climate Ambition Summit to summon the world's attention and committed action to climate change and the need to support developing countries as they transition to a renewable future. Ambition in mitigation must be in parallel with ambition in climate justice. Now is the time for all countries to stand as one in defense of our only home. Let's deliver the climate justice that Africans, the world and the planet we share demand and deserve. Asante sana.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Excellencies, it is the African Union Summit in February that approved the co-hosting of this summit by Kenya and the AU Commission. And to speak to us next on his aspirations for the summit, let us welcome His Excellency President Azali Assoumani, President of the Comoros and the Chairperson of the African Union. Welcome, Your Excellency.
Kila mtu anapawa, hata Maulana hajawahi kutugawa, tulitafuta amani tukatoka huko.
Excellence, Monsieur Ahmed Abako, Dr William Ruto, Président de la République de Kenya, Monsieur Antonio Guterres, Secrétaire général de l'Organisation des Nations Unies, Monsieur Moussa Faki, Président de la Commission de l'Union africaine, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs les chefs d'État et de gouvernement, Mesdames et Messieurs les chefs des organisations internationales, distingués invités en vos rangs et grades, Mesdames et Messieurs, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Au moment où tous les regards sont tournés vers nous, l'Afrique, notre continent, se réunit pour trouver des solutions africaines concertées au plus haut niveau aux grandes problématiques liées au climat. J'espère alors que nous réussirons.
Smart 24, driving business.
Say goodbye to paperwork and travel costs. Now every MTN customer can register to invest in securities anytime and anywhere with Zabu in a few simple steps. Step 1. Dial *292#. Step 2. Select option 1. Register with Zabu. Step 3. Enter your full names. Step 4. Enter your national identification number. Step 5. Enter your national identification card number. In 24 hours, you will receive an SMS confirming your registration. Congratulations, you are now ready to invest.
Cooking oil like no other makes your meal so sweet and scrumptious. The taste of Uganda, yeah,
Smart 24, driving business.
Notre continent, bien que nous n'en soyons responsables qu'à hauteur de moins de 4% des émissions de gaz à effet de serre, les États insulaires en développement de l'Afrique, comme l'Union des Comores, subissent ces effets de manière extrême tout en étant les moins outillés à y faire face. Cependant, en dépit de tous ces défis, l'Afrique doit avancer et réaliser ses ambitions, consignées dans les politiques et stratégies régionales et nationales, mais surtout dans les contributions déterminées nationales. Ainsi, l'organisation de ce sommet africain sur le climat dans ce beau pays exemplaire dans ce cadre tombe à pied nommé pour redéfinir l'approche conventionnelle entre les pays du Nord et les pays du Sud en mettant l'accent sur l'approche d'une responsabilité partagée qui favorise le dialogue et met en évidence le potentiel de solutions collaboratives. En ce sens, l'Afrique doit d'abord tirer profit de cette plateforme pour trouver des solutions innovantes, inclusives et durables, définies par nous et pour nous, et rechercher ensuite la collaboration pour une action climatique tangible sur la planète. Honorable assistance, mesdames et messieurs, le continent africain est particulièrement impacté par les catastrophes naturelles. Les Comores, pour prendre un exemple, subissent en moyenne chaque année d'énormes dommages et pertes causés par les séismes, les inondations et les cyclones tropicaux, évalués chaque année à plus de 5,7 millions de dollars américains. Mon pays étant extrêmement durable, nous avons entrepris plusieurs initiatives et programmes en faveur de l'atténuation des gestes et de l'adaptation. En matière d'atténuation, le secteur de l'énergie présente des potentiels importants, en particulier par le recours aux énergies renouvelables, dont l'éolienne, le photovoltaïque et la géothermie, pour la production d'électricité et la diminution de l'usage du bois de chauffe dans le résidentiel et l'industrie. Ce secteur se retrouve également dans le plan commun émergent 2030, nouvellement adopté, dont l'ambition est de faire des Comores d'ici 2030 un pays résilient au choc dans toutes les dimensions du développement durable. Pour ce qui est de l'adaptation aux Comores, comme dans l'ensemble du continent africain, le secteur de l'agriculture durement impacté par la Covid et la guerre en Ukraine revêt également une importance capitale. Les répercussions qui en découlent accentuent davantage la crise alimentaire que connaît le continent à l'heure actuelle. Nous devons alors saisir l'occasion de ce sommet pour identifier les actions à mettre en œuvre en faveur d'un système alimentaire plus durable et plus résistant aux chocs afin de garantir des moyens d'existence récents et une alimentation saine et durable. Nous devons privilégier la protection sociale, l'innovation et la numérisation ainsi que les pratiques agricoles durables, préservant à la fois nos ressources naturelles, notre santé et le climat. Mais la protection et la préservation de nos ressources halieutiques doivent aussi être au centre de nos préoccupations. C'est dans ce sens que la déclaration de Moroni, issue de la conférence ministérielle sur l'économie bleue et l'action climatique en Afrique, organisé en étroite collaboration avec la Commission de l'Union africaine, la Commission économique pour l'Afrique, l'Union internationale pour la conservation et la nature et la Commission de l'océan Indien, a mis l'accent sur les changements climatiques en reconnaissant le rôle primordial que jouent les mers et les océans dans l'adaptation et l'atténuation. Dans cet élan, nous appelons à une considération particulière des États insulaires africains dans les négociations en soulignant leur spécificité géographique, leur forte vulnérabilité face aux événements extrêmes et aux différentes crises environnementales actuelles. Nous plaidons pour un soutien à l'initiative de la Grande Muraille Bleue pour une économie bleue durable et régénératrice d'emplois et lançons un appel pour un nouveau partenariat à travers le renforcement de la coopération, des partenariats et des collaborations. Nous suggérons dans ce cas l'augmentation de l'aide financière d'adaptation promise, sachant que le montant de 86 milliards de dollars par an destiné à l'Afrique est trop faible pour surmonter les coûts actuels. Nous plaidons également en faveur de l'opérationnalisation des mécanismes de fonds liés aux pertes et dommages avec une flexibilité et une facilité d'accès pour tous les pays vulnérables africains, particulièrement les États insulaires au développement. Il est ainsi primordial pour nous, Africains, de nous pencher sur la nécessité de nous approprier les technologies de pointe spécialisées dans la surveillance du climat afin d'alerter à temps nos populations sur les événements extrêmes. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, je voudrais pour conclure souligner que la menace mondiale du changement climatique et la dégradation de l'environnement est sur le point d'exacerber le nombre déjà croissant de situations d'urgence et complexes qui affectent les femmes et les jeunes de manière disproportionnée. Je reste alors confiant que la déclaration de Nairobi reflètera certainement notre solidarité africaine à parler d'une seule voix pour exprimer nos spécificités africaines. Je suis surtout confiant qu'elle proposera de vraies solutions aux grandes problématiques continentales et mondiales que l'on défendra également lors de la COP 28 qui se tiendra prochainement aux Émirats arabes unis, un pays qui mérite notre confiance grâce notamment à l'engagement personnel fort et constant de son président, son Altesse, Cheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, en faveur des technologies innovatrices susceptibles de contribuer à combattre efficacement le changement climatique. Asante sana, je vous remercie.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Excellencies, now to cap for us this opening session is the chairperson of the Committee of African Heads of State and Government on Climate Change, and also the President of the Republic of Kenya, His Excellency William Samoei Ruto. Welcome, Your Excellency.
Your Excellencies, honorable ministers, distinguished participants, delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to Kenya. This African moment is a global moment where climate action is actually green growth. I am delighted to be here with you for a number of reasons. First, I am excited to participate in this summit as a scientist who has done some research on ecological impacts of human activity on fragile and precious ecosystems, including rivers and wetlands. I am also privileged to be leading the Kenyan delegation to the Africa Climate Summit. And besides, I have the honor for the time being of serving the young green continent of the future as the chair of CAHOST, the Committee of African Heads of State on Climate Change. And for hosting this event with my good brothers from the AU. And I dare say this conversation is happening in the right city, where the UN has the global environmental capital, where we have UNEP. I am therefore highly encouraged by your strong response for our invitation to attend and participate in this inaugural transformative Continental Assembly convened to focus on climate action from the standpoint of generating African solutions to global challenges. The participation in the numerous events that make up this summit has so far demonstrated impressive commitment, extraordinary enthusiasm, exemplary motivation, and unparalleled determination to confront the problems, clarify issues, engage inclusively, and define a unique strategy platform for the implementation of bold interventions to catalyze progress in the global climate action agenda. I welcome you to Nairobi, our burgeoning and sleepless green city in the sun that is bounded by a national wildlife park and a close canopy of indigenous forest. In between, our capital pulsates with the restless energy of community, enterprise, industry, innovation, learning, fun, and adventure. Please, feel at home and find time to enjoy the sights and sounds of our city and country. And when I say welcome home, it's both figuratively, but also in reality. I did say yesterday, I did inform the participants yesterday that Kenya, where you are sitting, a few kilometers from where you are sitting, has been discovered the earliest remains of man on earth. And it means that before you guys went all over the place in Africa, Europe, and America, and the rest of the world, we all began from here. And therefore, it is correct for me to tell you, welcome home. And while you are away, these are the greetings, just so that you find your way around. Jambo is the greetings. Maybe, and when somebody else tells you Jambo, you reply Jambo. It's simple. Jambo. Good. I will take you one more step. When you want to say, how are you? You say Mambo. Simple. And then the reply is Poa. Okay, let's go. Mambo. Good. There you go. So I'm sure you'll find your way around with that. Africa is a very young continent. Our median age is 19. Africa's youthfulness is precisely the attitude that has inspired African leaders to imagine a future where Africa finally steps into the stage as an economic and industrial power, an effective and positive actor on a global arena. I am very proud because of this realization, and it has motivated Africa's leaders to create meaningful opportunities for young people to participate in, contribute to, and take charge of consequential endeavors in many sectors. This bold policy is already transforming the strategic landscape of climate action and is swiftly propelling our continent to a focal point of global sustainability agenda. On Sunday, at the Youth Summit, we saw for ourselves the immensity of the potential that we can unleash simply by facilitating positive youth action at all levels in every sector. Potential and opportunity are both futuristic propositions. The African Climate Summit has been designed to enable us locate our intense engagements and the most energized discourse in order to facilitate imaginative, problem-solving, and innovative interventions that are bold enough to meet the critical challenges of the present and future times. This is why potential, opportunity, the future, and youth are recurrent themes that underlie our interactions in this summit. We have convened here to consult, deliberate, and collaborate in imagining and designing the future of climate action globally and its implications for African aspirations to achieve shared prosperity within one generation. This summit is dedicated exclusively to the transformation of potential into opportunity, the conversion of ideas into actions, and the turning of plans into results. It is about creating a firm consensus, designing effective strategies, securing commitments, and forging transformative partnerships that will drive climate action in the direction and at the rate required to pull our continent and planet back from the brink of a climate disaster. The urgency of this moment is informed by the knowledge that climate change is the greatest challenge, not only to the well-being of humanity, but to every existence of life on Earth, and that only urgent and coordinated action on a global scale can stop the impending catastrophe by lowering greenhouse gas emissions and reducing their concentration in the atmosphere. This is an immense and formidable challenge, even at the best of times. However, the time we are in, and in which we must implement this urgent and daunting undertaking, is a complicated and difficult time for nations throughout the world. Regional conflict with geopolitical ramifications have compounded the disruptive impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic to throw global supply chains into disarray, slowing down economies, raising the cost of living, suppressing economic growth, and straining food systems to a breaking point. The complex interplay of these circumstances also combine with other localized vulnerabilities to drive adversity in many communities, placing intense pressure on governments to reconfigure resources, allocation, and other strategic interventions. In short, it would be understandable if African leaders prioritized other commitments and relegated climate action to an afterthought. This is why I proudly celebrate the courage and imagination with which the people of Africa and their leaders have converged with extraordinary focus and commitment on the climate agenda, not as an additional or peripheral concern for public policy, but as the foremost priority and the defining intervention in our collective journey to shared prosperity. As a result, patient consultation, thorough debate, determined collaboration, and bold confrontation of facts in issue, it has become clear to us at the Africa Union, under the aegis of the Committee of African Heads of State on Climate Change, that tackling climate change also produces the solutions for the complex interconnected crisis that we face today. This is what this summit is designed to underscore. Collectively, we hold the power to transform the current continental and global trajectory. More critically, we all have an urgent responsibility to do so with a sense of collective purpose that matches the sense of urgency demonstrated by Africa's young people at the Youth Summit earlier this week. Although we are gathered here to explore the means by which we can unite in action for the greater good, we have taken full account of the fact that we are not all at the same place in terms of our experiences with climate change. All countries struggle to achieve socio-economic progress under various constraints. Due to a range of complex and interconnected historical, political, and economic factors, African countries struggle with unique, inordinate, and incredibly complex structural drawbacks in the quest to provide opportunities for their peoples to achieve prosperity. Nevertheless, we have all, in our different ways, succeeded in making progress over the years amid these extraordinary difficulties. The tragedy of climate change is that it is relentlessly eating away at this progress. And going by evidence based on scientific projections, its appetite to consume our GDP will grow in years to come. We are already losing between 5 and 15% of our GDP growth every year to the adverse impacts of climate change. At the same time, the cost of adaptation continues to rise along with the cost of living, while the cost of development capital for African countries remains prohibitive, as millions of our youth remain unemployed. Only rapid and inclusive transformation, powered by robust industrialization, can place us firmly on a path towards sustainable resolution of these challenges. A sound understanding of the nature and causes of climate change, coupled with our experience of its devastating effects, has provided us with a robust early warning system that the classical economic development progression precedent is not available for us as a pathway to this transformation. As Africans, we are strongly persuaded that not only is it urgent for us to execute an audacious leapfrogging of the traditional developmental pathway to industrialization, but urgent ecological imperatives also dictate that we must go green first before industrializing, and not vice versa, like the advanced industrial economies had the luxury to do. I emphasize this point to underscore the principle underlying Africa's position on climate action agenda and the foundation of our strategic, institutional, and policy direction. We have an unprecedented opportunity to abandon the well-trodden yet unsustainable path of the past and forge a new route that aligns economic inclusion and shared prosperity with climate commitment imperatives. Africa's low rate of greenhouse gas emissions must not relegate us to the margins and footnotes of the global climate agenda. Africa must step forward as the cornerstone around which effective climate solutions are built. Yesterday, I encouraged participants in this summit to disregard the grievance standpoint and instead consider climate action imperative through an opportunity lens. As soon as we do that, a nexus of feasible sequences begins to emerge in an unbroken continuum from potential to opportunity, and through investments and technological innovation into green manufacturing and industrialization, including shared prosperity. Our untapped renewable energy potential, together with the world's youngest population of skilled, motivated, and knowledgeable industrial men and women, along with Africa's abundant endowment of natural assets from carbon sinks to arable land and mineral wealth, confer on us the indispensable fundamentals to swiftly become a cost-competitive industrial hub with ample capacity to decarbonize global manufacturing and green the economies of our continent, our neighborhoods, and the globe. It is good for us to be open about the need to confront a couple of basic truths. First, it is demonstrably clear that none of the world's industrialized nations will be able to achieve their net zero goals within the time indicated by scientists to avert further warming. Secondly, unlocking Africa's potential to undertake economic transformation along a green trajectory is the most feasible, just, and efficient way to attain a net zero world by 2050. With those two combined, Africa's capacity to limit its own emissions is the clearest pathway to enable the world to achieve its climate action targets. Africa's opportunity is a global opportunity and a chance for humanity to redeem its intergenerational legacy. Scientific experts have consistently demonstrated from analyzing available evidence and making projections that these can be achieved while generating jobs in their millions, creating enormous investment opportunities, and catalyzing unprecedented economic growth. Under a proper green growth paradigm, climate action also serves as a robust engine for poverty reduction, employment and wealth creation, and economic transformation. By definition, effective climate action must entail technological leapfrogging to disrupt and invent the industrial development pathway and go green fast. It must also involve effective decarbonization of global production and supply chains and deliberate efforts to remove carbon from the atmosphere at scale. Understood this way, green growth aligns perfectly with opportunity-oriented perspectives of climate change, which presents Africa with its most important means of achieving stability, prosperity, and development beyond middle-income industrial status. To achieve green growth, we in Africa have committed to move with speed and under various effective frameworks to develop the necessary instruments, institutions, policies, and strategies through which we shall design and implement incentives that will accelerate the delivery of priority actions. We shall also support our youth, especially those in enterprise, to enable innovation and deliver localized solutions for the benefit of our communities, and at the same time attract other African and international investors to finance climate action. Every step of this journey will require partnership that facilitate collaboration and multilateral collective action to achieve just development financing mechanisms, deliver equitable access to markets for Africa's green products and services, and a just regime that provides liquidity, debt relief, and affordable investment capital everywhere on the continent at scale. We are all connected to our common humanity and a shared stake in the vitality and livability of our planet. We are also bound firmly by the fact that Earth is all we have, that we have no other home, and that no alternative planet to resort to when things burn here. The most salient implication of this knowledge is that we cannot approach climate action and human development from a disconnected or adversarial standpoint. We cannot pursue climate action through insular, solitary policies. Global warming cannot be mitigated by air conditioning our little pockets and corners of the world. Prosperity cannot be pursued in a zero-sum exclusive fashion, because the resulting injustice and inequality are the drivers of inequity, poverty, conflict, and activities that threaten biodiversity and encourage pollution. We are all interconnected. That is a statement of fact. And this existential moment provides us with a unique opportunity to reconnect with our shared humanity. In this summit, you will have heard and will continue to learn more about the bold, transformative, innovative fruits of partnership, cooperation, and collaboration that are already underway in various parts of Africa. I invite you to pay close attention to as many of these cases as possible, and assure you that you will be surprised, challenged, and inspired by the many wonderful demonstrations of bold initiatives in the face of many opportunities. That is the essence of this summit. It is an orientation, and in fact an orientation run designed to familiarize us with our journey into the future, driven by African solutions, powered by African resources, and anchored on African opportunities. The collaboration I have in mind must be bold in ambition, broad in scope for their vision, deep in terms of diversity of their stakeholders, and long in terms of their geographical reach. An impressive example that I have had opportunity to interact with is the Global Center for Adaptation, an organization based in Rotterdam in the Netherlands, whose constitution is an appealing emblem of our aspiration, from the aspirational design of its global headquarters and futuristic regional headquarters in Nairobi, comprising green walls and roofs, as well as rain gardens, to the collaborative culture of its staff. Unsurprisingly, the center is intended to inspire the world to thrive with nature instead of pursuing the dangerous course of seeking to thrive at the expense of nature. The Center spearheads the Africa Adaptation Acceleration Program, a focal point collaboration with the University of Nairobi, Africa Development Bank, and the Africa Union Commission as part of the continent's response to the climate crisis. I am delighted to announce that as an outcome of this summit today, Kenya will host the GCA Africa headquarters here in Nairobi. Ladies and gentlemen, it has taken tremendous courage, effort, and determination to leave behind us the old continent that was historically profiled with intense negativity. The Africa whose people neither are there to be seen or heard has summoned the confidence and readiness to confront hard facts, engage truthfully, and forge a common position on critical issues that project a new, bold, radically transformative voice into the global discourse. And let me say here that we have discussed potential. And it is true, we need to have a conversation about Africa's potential. Why? Because we have been profiled negatively. The continent of disease, war, poverty. But we are stepping forward to say, look here, Africa is the continent with 60% of the world's renewable energy assets. Whether you talk about wind, whether you talk about solar, geothermal, hydropower. Number two, we're saying Africa is the continent that has 40% of the world's critical minerals for energy transition, whether you talk about nickel, cobalt, lithium, manganese. This is where those reserves are. Number three, this is the continent, the youngest continent with a median age of 19. 25% of the world's population will be living in this continent by 2050. We will have 40% of the world's workforce by 2100. This is the continent number 4 that has 2/3 of the world's uncultivated arable land that can transform through smart agriculture into the store, the production store of the world. And number 5, this is the continent that is the lungs of the world. We have the largest natural carbon sequestration infrastructure. In fact, we dare say, if there was a company for collecting garbage globally, and I'm talking about carbon garbage, Africa would have the largest shares because we have the largest lungs. The only problem is that those who produce the garbage refuse to pay their bills and profile the company as broke when it is actually them who have refused to pay the bills. So that is our continent. It's a continent of tremendous potential. And that is why Chinua Achebe told us that until the lion learned the art of writing, all stories glorified the hunter. I think we have learned to write. I think we have learned the art of writing. And that is why we are going to write our own narrative. That is the continent that we belong to. Let me also say another thing, opportunity. Yes, this climate crisis, climate change, and the climate crisis that comes with it, yes, it is true, we contributed the least. Yes, it is also true, we are suffering the most. But in this crisis is Africa's opportunity. And that is what we want to focus on, Africa's opportunity to unlock the tremendous resources that we have for green energy transition. And we must exploit this opportunity. And number three, so that I conclude, is that this is the continent that has the highest investment potential. We are only limited by two things. Number one, we are limited, as I said earlier in my statement, by high interest rates for development capital. Many of our countries, and we are here and they say figures don't lie, 9 countries are already in debt distress in our continent, over the cliff. 13 countries are classified as high risk, and another 17 countries are classified as moderate risk. And the biggest contributor to debt distress in our continent is high interest rates. We pay 5 times more than others, meaning that in fact, the architecture is set up in a manner that if you borrow, it will be difficult for you to pay. And that is why we need a conversation, and a very candid conversation, and we are saying this in all honesty, around how do we get concessional funding? How do we pay as much as others are paying? How do we get Africa away from paying 5 times more? And I asked in this gathering, we're not asking to be favored. We're not asking to be treated differently. We want a fair financial system that treats everybody equally. Ladies and gentlemen, that is not too much to ask. A fair international financial architecture is not a fair proposition or an unfair proposition to make. Number two, many of our countries are headed into debt distress because of climate change. Let's be honest, we are suffering the most, whether it is in the Sahel with drought, whether it is in the Horn of Africa with drought, whether it is in South Africa and the southern part of our continent with cyclones, and we are saying the suffering is across the globe, but we carry the biggest brunt. I'll contextualize this. And because of climate change, we are forced to divert resources that are meant for economic growth into dealing with the effects of climate change. I will contextualize this. In Kenya, we lost 2.5 million heads of livestock in northern part of Kenya. Combined with Ethiopia and Somalia and Djibouti, we lost 9.5 million heads of livestock. So what did I have to do in Kenya? So in Kenya, I've had to increase resources meant for school feeding from 1.5 million children in school, under school feeding. We've had to scale up this year to 4 million kids in school to be put under school feeding, and we've had to rearrange the budget to provide for that. So when we say climate change is destroying our economies, we are not making statements, we are making statements of fact. And that is what is driving many of our economies in that direction. And let me contextualize this further. When I was first elected as a member of parliament in a rural constituency in Kenya, I represented a community that is so proud that they think debt is not a good thing. They are risk averse and very debt averse. So, to try and encourage the community that time, then there was this phrase, and I want to say it in the indigenous community. There was a phrase that kai kai kobarin besen kosir kobarin banan. I will explain to you what that means. There is besen and there is banan. Besen is debt. Banan is poverty. So it is said in this community, if you must die, it is better to die of debt than to die of poverty. Because you are dying anyway. So it's... And so, to contextualize that into this debate, we don't want to die in this continent, we don't want to die of debt, but we also don't want to die of poverty. That is why we must have a conversation around multilateral development banks and concessional financing and how we can finance our economies using resources that do not punish us. And when we make this proposition, we have tremendous respect for our multilateral development banks. They are doing their best. We have the best of respect for them. But we believe they can do better. We believe that there is an opportunity. We need to explore the SDR, Special Drawing Rights window. And this time round, we want to have that window when it's made available because it is possible. Let those who need the resources get, not those who don't. In the last experience, those who did not need the resources got more than those who needed the resources. We need to have a paradigm shift this time round. And number two, we believe that it is possible to expand concessional financing through leveraging on the balance sheets of these institutions. And finally, to be able to unlock the resources that we need to be able to drive these new investment and financing opportunities, especially for green energy. We believe it is time to have a conversation about carbon tax. I said we need to have a conversation about carbon tax. And I mean we need to have a conversation about carbon tax. Yes. We believe it is the only way, it is among the ways that we can raise additional and adequate resources for us to finance our development. And while we are thinking about financing, for us in Africa, three things are very important. As they say in Kenya, mambo ni matatu. Number one, speed. It takes inordinate to access any meaningful resources. Number two, it requires scale, because we've all agreed that enormous resources are required. And number three, affordability, so that we all pay the same. And that is why this event is both Africa's climate summit and a global pre-COP28 convention. Africa is meeting and Africans are talking. The world is listening. We must use this opportunity to lead the world in a new direction towards a future that holds immense promise for both Africa and the entire world. The many initiatives showcased at this summit testify to the courage of African enterprise and innovators to pursue breakthroughs, exploit opportunities, develop models, and take risks to make our tomorrow better than our today. When the global stocktake is released, there will be another opportunity to test our courage and resolve by asking each other hard questions in the spirit of fashioning the new way to achieve rapid improvements. We have therefore committed to conclude this summit with a declaration which will firmly encourage everyone to keep their promises, even in hard times, as a matter of justice, to hold each other to account, to collaborate, and to innovate. This African moment is a global moment. We are in word and deed full stakeholders in this global journey and its primary navigators at this stage. I urge everyone at this summit to exercise bold leadership and contribute to our efforts to reconfigure global markets and international institutions around African aspirations and strategic goals. I call on each one of you to do their part so that the potential that lies in our continent can deliver opportunities for Africa's youth, communities, enterprises, and nations to actualize a future for all of us. It is a matter of long-standing African wisdom that if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go with others. We have a long way to go and no time to lose. In this moment of existential urgency of whole humanity, I dare say that we have our ancestors' permission to innovate a way not only to go fast, but also go together, provided we consult thoroughly, engage in good faith, collaborate effectively, and proceed inclusively. This is an emergency, and we must undertake climate action and green growth with this understanding. I thank you. God bless you. God bless Africa. Asante sana.
Your Excellency, you have some tasks to perform, so please come back to the stage.
I have been requested to ask the climate envoy from America, who is scheduled to take a flight, to take a few moments and come and speak to us. My good brother John Kerry is somewhere in this audience. Welcome, because he also has a declaration to make and an announcement to make. Welcome, John.
Mr. President, distinguished presidents, Your Excellencies, fellow ministers, colleagues, friends, ladies and gentlemen, I have a feeling that after that extraordinarily powerful presentation by President Ruto, nobody should say anything. We should just act. Maybe I should start by just saying Jumbo. Works. Mr. President, thank you for convening everybody here. Over the years, I've been privileged, Mr. Secretary General, like you, we've been at many of these conferences, and the words come easily. The actions seem to have been more difficult over time. It's a great honor for me to be able to be here representing President Biden at this very important summit. And I want you to know, as I listened, and as you listened, I could feel this room, something is happening. This is different. I feel that. This is different. I think, Mr. President, I would just say to you, your leadership is palpable. We feel it. And in what you have said today, there is such a clear path ahead for all of us. Africa is meeting. Africa is speaking. Africa is deciding. And nothing could make a greater difference, I think, on a global basis, given what you just heard from the President about the remarkable resources that are here in Africa, about the young people who are thirsty, hungry for a future. And so Africa and this moment offer an enormous opportunity. This problem that we are facing is human-made. It's about pollution. It's not very complicated. It doesn't take a rocket scientist or a mathematician or equation work to its end in order to understand what's happening. Humanity is threatened by humanity, by the decisions that we are unwilling, it seems, to make. So, at this moment, I believe it is clear that Africa presents some of the greatest opportunity in the world. To do what? To win this battle about how we heat our homes, drive our vehicles, light our factories and our homes. This is about fundamental production of energy. And if we will make the right choices about that, the future is different for everybody. That's what's so attractive and important about what President Ruto was saying. You want to have a cleaner life? You want to have a healthier life? Less cancer? Eliminate 8 million people dying every single year because of the lack of quality air that we breathe? All of that comes from the unabated burning of fossil fuel. And it is challenging, if not threatening, our very planet that we all live on. So, 20 countries produce 80% of all the emissions. Mine is one of them. 20 countries. And it is critical for all of those 20 countries to immediately take steps to get on the path to the Paris Agreement, to align, to have the ability to keep 1.5 degrees alive. That will only happen if those 20 countries take the lead and make it happen. The crisis now is also, if justice is to mean anything, it certainly has to mean that if there's going to be a transition, everybody has to be able to share in the benefits of that transition. And right now, it is clear that you can't talk about a just transition, when some people, there's no transition at all. Or when some people, there is acute, unfair debt that swallows and drowns the choices that those countries have to make. My friends, adaptation, which wasn't on the front burner in the early years that we've been working at this, but it is now, and it should be, for the simple reason that without adequate adaptation, we don't make it. That's the predicament that we've created for ourselves for where we are now. So adaptation is critical, and the damage Mother Nature is telling us on a weekly, daily basis. Every 18 days, we have a $1 billion climate event somewhere on this planet. So adaptation is critical. President Biden has now launched program called Prepare, the President's Emergency Program for Adaptation. And he has committed that we are going to help at least 500 million people in developing countries, especially in Africa, to be able to adapt to the worst impacts of this crisis. He has committed the United States to work alongside African nations to lead the way in adapting to and managing the impacts of the climate crisis. And as part of Prepare, he is providing, or will fight with the Congress and guarantee that we will provide $3 billion annually for adaptation for the $12 billion program that he believes is essential in order to be able to do our part to adapt to this challenge. It is why we are working with partners on the Transitional Committee this year to design an effective fund to help vulnerable developing countries respond to loss and damage. And it is why last year in Sharm el-Sheikh, the President decided that the United States needed to try to accelerate that process. And we joined with our friends in Europe and elsewhere to say that no, it's not adequate to do that over a 2-year period. We need to close out and understand where we're going with the Loss and Damage Fund in 1 year, this year, when we all meet in Dubai. So in addition, as part of implementing Prepare, I'm pleased to announce today also, we're going to provide an additional $30 million for climate-resilient food security efforts across Africa. First, $20 million to the Africa Adaptation Initiative for the Food Security Accelerator, and that will invest in agricultural businesses and help them create their own independent, climate-resilient supply chains. Second, $10 million will go to the Climate Resilient Adaptation Finance and Technology Transfer Facility to scale technologies so that we can advance adaptation efforts like cold chain storage, which would help maintain the quality and the safety of food from the farm all the way to the homes of people in the world. We've learned that adaptation saves lives, creates jobs, and obviously it's just plain old common sense.
Smart 24, driving business.
Bulu magic is my joy. Ono bulu magic wange.